know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from still cold BC and scorching Florida, this is Left for the Valley 2.0. My name is Kevin, and I tell you that irony is a pastor asking for money to solve church problems, but tells you to pray for solve yours. Joining me as usual is a team that drinks so much that when they give a urine sample, there's an olive in it. Guys, welcome back. Oh, I hope you guys are good.
Oh, yeah.
And this show is brought to you by our patrons. You too can become a patron. Go to patreon.com/LATV and help us grow the show. Today, guys, we'll have a great discussion with Dr. Richard Firth about a human history of emotion, but that's in the second half of the show. And by the way, before we get on doing all this, I want to give a quick salutation to our New Zealanders listeners. Apparently, we're making a bit of a small dent in Kiwi land there. So,
Wow.
if you want to send us a message from New Zealand, just go to send us an email, leftatvalley@outlook.com. Excellent. Guys, let's do our usual chit-chat.
Okay.
Right on. Yeah.
Let's
Do it.
talk.
Pat it up. Shoot the breeze.
All right. Discrimination isn't just a Christian thing, news. There's a growing group out of India called, I'm going to massacre this, Rashtriya Samyavsevak Sangh, or it's known as the RSS. And they have chapters all around the world and in places like Canada and the U.S. Now, this is a Hindu group that is promoting so much hard right-wing views with the goal of making India into a Hindu-only. Now, in case you didn't know, India is not, it is primarily Hindu, but not only Hindu. There's a large amount of Muslims, Sikh, and all that kind of stuff, and many different kind of religions in India.
Mhm.
So this RSS group apparently is, quote, one of the most influential organizations in the world, said Stephen Zhao, which is a spokesperson for the National Council of Canadian Muslims. The council in the world and the World Sikh Organization of Canada are trying to draw attention to what academics, including some in Canada and the U.S., are saying they have witnessed for years, which is an increasing influence and threats from the movement closely linked to the government in New Delhi for what they say promotes discrimination against minority religious groups at home and abroad. It's vital to keep in mind that the ideal nationalism projected by the RSS networks victimizes not just ethno-religious minorities like Muslims, Sikh, and Christians, but also members of India, lowercase case Hindus, because in Hinduism there is a caste system, which is basically where determines your rank into in society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, India itself has not always supported the RSS and what they call Hindutva. It's kind of a philosophy. They banned it 3 times since its inception in 1925 as a paramilitary volunteer organization. But the current government seems very open to it under the Bharatiya Janata Party. This is the party that's currently ruling India. A former researcher with the Canadian Anti-Hate Group Network who has chronicled the far-right movements within the supported groups told the CBC in a previous interview that Hindutva is a superficial politicization of Hinduism and has led to discrimination and sectarian violence against minority groups in India like Muslims and Christians. And, of course, atheists as well.
Of course.
Yeah, you're always in there somewhere.
We're always in there.
Human Rights Watch has also attributed religious and ethnic violence to the groups that espouse the Hindutva ideology. I'm going to get that word right eventually. In December 2021, in the northern Indian city of Haridwar, Hindu religious leaders openly called for genocide against Muslims in an event organized by right-wing Hindutva following leaders. So these people are already calling for genocide here.
Jeez. Do they have their own CPAC? Is that what they're
They probably do, or something very similar to that. So you think that violence against other minority groups like the Sikhs and the Dalit has increased in India in recent years, say academic. According to multiple media outlets, the RSS has an estimated membership of more than 5 million worldwide, including the Prime Minister Modi and the majority of these ministers in government right now in India. So this is going to be very interesting to keep a look at, because right now India is also set to host the G20 in September, where human rights will hopefully be on the agenda. So, of course, on the show, we always talk a lot about Christians. We talk about Muslims on a regular basis, but we kind of have a tendency to forget about these other religions out there. It seems that also Hinduism is having a huge issue as well.
Yeah, I always thought that Hindu folks were more chill. I didn't realize they were so fucking fascistic. That's wild.
Same thing with Buddhism, right? Everybody thinks that Buddhism is really chill, really zen, and all
very
that.
zen.
No.
Yeah, they have a word for
I'm going to
it.
be connecting with the nirvana of the universe, man.
Because you see a couple of Hollywood stars that are going all peace and love, man, doesn't mean that it's that. It's not that at all. Actually, there's a lot of sexism in Buddhism, and there's a lot of discrimination as well. So,
wow, weird.
Okay.
I wonder, it is very interesting when because we live in the United States and you're in Canada and we're dealing with the far right, and it's made up mostly of evangelical Christians. And that's usually the thing that we're rallying against. And we tend to forget that there are extreme beliefs in other parts of the world that we're not really thinking. And I understand that because we're Westerners, and I'm not really thinking about what's going on in India, except when it comes into my periphery, and I'm like, oh, there's shit that goes on there too. It's wonderful. And also too, I'm really curious of how this is going to go, because I don't like the idea of criticizing too much with people. Doesn't sit well with me, and I'm really hoping, like you said, that human rights will become an issue. And also too, maybe it's because I'm an atheist and I just don't see the need to kill people over their beliefs and discriminate against them. I don't care as long as you're a nice person. Just don't be an asshat. And when it really bothers me when it gets taken to such an extreme where people are going to actually get harmed. And it happens here too. And it's just a reminder that people are terrible no matter where you're from. There's terrible people. It's just frustrating.
I thought bringing that story was important because you're right. I mean, most of the time we talk about Christians, especially here in North America. We'll deal with Muslims a bit here and there. But, we live in a global society now. So it's good to remind ourselves that there are some other things that are happening on the other side of the planet as well. And India is one of those countries that is going to have a very close eye on the future. Like you said, they're about to host the G20. They're one of the most populous nations in the world. And a lot of stuff and a lot of businesses are moving to India. Right, in search of cheaper labor and stuff like that. So I think it's a very good idea that we start looking deeply to what happens in Indian culture as well. Not just that, especially up here in Vancouver, we have a large segment of the population that is of Indo-Canadian descent, right? And they have deep roots in India as well. There's a lot of Sikhism in this part of the world, right here in Canada, in Vancouver, in the region, and they're deeply affected by this, right? So because it seems that their entire religious way of life could be threatened by the Hindu society of India. So it's closer than you think. We think of it as it's far, it's India, but it's actually closer than you think. I don't know what's the population in Florida of Hindu Americans or Indian Americans, but
I know there, I have a mosque that I could walk to from my house. It's less than a mile, and there's quite a significant population of Muslims that do attend it. I'm sure we're not as diverse as some other places in the United States, but there's a heavy Middle Eastern population that lives here.
There we go.
So, and I live in a very white county, so that tells you that there's enough people that live. My city has about 50,000 people, so that's a good. I probably say 1% to 2% of them are probably from that portion of the world or were raised in a Muslim religion. So that enough that we have a very prominent Muslim mosque. Literally, I could walk to it. I'm lazy. I'm not going to do that, but I could if I really wanted to.
Plus, I'm not Muslim.
And there's these little pockets of it, and we always know that global politics affect us on a global scale. So I'm sure I'm sure in certain parts of the United States that have a strong Muslim population and a strong Hindu population, and those politics and ideas are going to, influence those foreigners, those Westerners, who there are foreigners that are living in our Western culture, that it's going to influence, their politics and how they think about people, because people have prejudices, and it was based on religion, which doesn't, it's not based in reality, but for them it is. Yeah. It affects your ideas.
I mean, let's put a quick scenario here. Imagine, for example, that India did become very Hindu-oriented society, and in Hinduism, cows are sacred. So all of a sudden, India decides not to deal with Americans because Americans eat hamburgers.
Yeah.
And what?
Yeah.
The turning religious of any society goes to our economic detriment, no matter which one it is. So this is why it's much better to live in a secular society, so we can actually have these discussions instead of having something based on, Shiva, whatever it is.
Well, freedom for religion and a secular society. Like, you need both, like, as far as I can tell anyway, because and it is really weird too when you get these like Muslims and stuff like in these high, like dense Muslim areas, and they start like agreeing with the Christians and like all like doing the same legislation to like kick trans people out of the schools and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's fucking weird.
It's very strange.
That's a perfect segue for Bradley, because in moronic news, Tennessee has signed a bill that would severely limit where drag shows can take place. Bravo, Tennessee. I'm glad you got your priorities straight.
Good God.
Forget about people dying or people needing help. Drag shows is what the problem is.
It's like, that's where the danger is right there,
That's my number one concern. Of all the things that are going on, where are the drag shows being done?
Drag shows, man. That's what my thing is. So while several states are currently considering restrictions against the performance, no other state has acted as quickly as Tennessee to ensure that drag shows cannot take place in public or in front of children. Will somebody save the children? The move lines up with Tennessee being among the states passing the most anti-LGBTQ legislation in the past few years. Okay. First of all, the word drag does not explicitly appear in the new legislation. Instead, it changes the definition of adult cabaret in Tennessee's laws to mean adult, quote, adult-oriented performance that are harmful to minors. So apparently drag is harmful to minors. The bill also says that male or female impersonators now fall under adult cabaret, along with topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, and strippers. So apparently drag queens and strippers are the same now in Tennessee.
Jesus, what the fuck? It doesn't even make sense.
Across the United States, right-wing activists and politicians claim that drag leads to sexualization or grooming of children. That's funny.
Jesus.
A drag queen, they're going to turn gay.
Well, something like that.
Well, and think about this. Look, if you're a predator, right, and you're trying to you want two things. You want cover and you want access to kids. Are you going to go to a fucking drag show? Is that where you're going to go to get that shit?
Right?
Like,
you're going to become the local soccer coach.
Exactly.
That's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do.
Now, drag, if you've never been to a drag show, drag does not typically involve nudity or stripping, which are more common parts in drag, which are more common in drag performances. Jesus Christ, when did I write this? Anyways, explicitly sexual and profane language is common in drag performances, but such language is typically toned down when children are present. Of course, right?
Yeah. But you can take a kid to a rated R movie here too. That's what doesn't fucking make any sense. It's like,
I've been to the medieval fair where there's kids in the audience, and it's like a PG-13. Like if you like, it's right on the bar. Like you like the adults know, and then but if you know the context, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little dirty.
Exactly.
So I'm like, what is this bullshit? You're being something homosexual bad, something.
Exactly. That's all it is.
Nudity and stripping doesn't happen in a drag show. It happens much more in the separate art of burlesque, what they call burlesque. Right?
Yeah. Like
Funny
Jessica
thing is,
Rabbit.
the governor of Tennessee, Governor Lee, himself once dressed up as a woman in high school.
What?
So, yes, and he was presented by a reporter with a photo that showed that the governor in high school senior dressed up in his woman's clothing, and that was published in the Franklin High School 1977 yearbook.
In 77, he was doing it
That's
before it was
what
cool.
he kind of graduated high school.
Year of my birth.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah.
You guys were done. So Lee, when the reporter basically said, "Hey, you once dressed up as a woman in high school at your senior year there," Lee said that it was ridiculous to compare the photo of him wearing women's clothing to sexualized entertainment in front of children. When he was asked after that for a specific example of inappropriate drag shows taking place in front of children, Lee did not cite any, only pointing out a nearby school building.
I don't know, like, but
We have
different
nothing.
from what I did, though. Different from that. It's
Yeah.
bad. Like the other stuff's bad. Not me.
There are
they have nothing. They have-
family-friendly drag shows that you can take your kids to. And also, drag people do not want to strip because have you ever seen a breastplate without clothing? Not a bunch of silicone and plastic. Not good. No.
I mean, I've been to a couple of drag shows myself. I even played around with some of the performers, and they play the role. They totally play the role. Like they're. Some of them were like flirting with me and all that, but I know full well that this is just a show. It's like I didn't go, "Ooh, this drag queen's coming on to me."
It's just fun, man, and it's
People need to
fun.
grow up.
Right, and that show, the RuPaul Drag Race, like that is wildly popular with kids. Like they fucking look, because it's perfect for kids. I mean, if you just don't have if you take away the like men wearing the clothes and stuff of the opposite gender or whatever, like you get a Blue's Clues character. Like they're just over the top, just be acting goofy and silly and having fun. It's just jeez Louise.
I wish people would stop putting a gender out of clothing, because clothing is just cloth. It doesn't have a gender. All clothing is non-gender if you stop being a bitch about it. So I wish people would just calm the fuck down, because I'm like, just because I wear a piece of clothing that doesn't have pant holes in it doesn't mean that it's essentially female or whatever. So it's just a stupid argument. It's all dog whistles and smoke screens, because they just don't like queer people. And they think that if you're exposed to a queer person, suddenly you're gonna turn gay, because that's how that works.
Yeah,
right.
I remember as a child, one of my uncles would dress up as Santa Claus, and one year, as a very young man, we're talking like I'm probably like 11 or 12. He says we need the ice fairy, and there was none of the girls were available, so I had to dress up as the ice fairy with a long pink dress and a little magic wand. And my uncles were laughing the whole time. The whole family was laughing the whole time. Says, "Yeah, it's the first time we've seen the ice fairy with a mustache." But it's like I didn't turn gay because of that. I didn't.
You didn't? No. John, did he turn gay? No? Okay.
I didn't sexually aggress any of the younger kids. I didn't. It's like God damn it, guys, grow up. Grow the fuck up, okay? It's just
he does have a picture with longer hair that kind of makes him look girlish, but yeah.
Let's go. Anyway,
fucking stupid.
And in Pope Believe This Crap News, you Pope Believe This Crap News. You guys ever heard of the capybara? The sympathetic South American capybara is also known as the largest rodent. What you might not know also is that the animal is an excellent swimmer and spends much of its time near or in water. They can hold their breath on the water for about 5 minutes. They take naps in water along riverbanks to stay cool. They have webbed feet, and even their streamlined facial features helping them to swim quickly away from potential predators. Enter the Vatican, who until recently had labeled the animal a fish.
What?
Yep, right. Yep. The Vatican said the capybara was a fish.
I mean, bats are birds, capybaras are fish. That really all makes sense.
No, birds aren't real, Bradley. Sorry, they're not real.
Changed that very recently. Last year, the state of California labeled bees as a fish, and that was in order to grant them legal protection. But that wasn't the case with what Rome did there. What you did not know is during the Middle Ages, eating meat of certain animal was not allowed during Lent. Lent is this period right now commemorating when Jesus apparently spent 40 days in the desert, which is happening about this time, just before Easter. So after the colonization of the Americas by European settlers, the clergymen in Venezuela wrote to the Vatican to ask if this new creature, with its webbed feet and fishy taste, could be classified as a fish so they could continue to eat it during the period of Lent.
Holy shit!
And this was
awesome.
So in 1784, the Vatican basically granted the capybara and labeled it a fish, along with other animals that spend more time in water, like beavers. So beavers and capybaras.
Beavers are a fish now, I guess.
That's right.
Wow.
Okay.
So they eat the capybara?
Sure.
They eat them?
And I am an ostrich.
And this was all done. This could have been another brilliant moment by Aurelian, really. So they could circumvent their stupid Lent tradition. So,
Have you seen how big they are?
They're big.
They look like giant hamsters. It's
fucking
crazy.
Guinea pigs. They look like giant guinea
Or
pigs.
guinea pigs. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're fish.
It's funny too because I live like right by there's like a nuclear site out here where it's like a big nuclear plant, and they used to see the capybaras around there like just naturally. I don't know if they're like indigenous to that.
Hold on, are you telling me there's capybaras in Florida?
In Florida, yeah, and people we all used to joke that there was the nuclear plant, that made them all like get big.
Yes, guinea pigs grow to large size. They've Godzilla them.
They're testing.
Yeah, exactly.
Rodents of a usual size.
I mean, they kind of are, yeah.
ROUSs.
I don't think they exist.
Oh, that's a callback. That's good. That's awesome. All right, my dear, do you have a top 10 for us today?
I do this week. So, I have an anatomical even though I'm a Frenchie, but still, I don't like frogs. They freak me out. So I thought I would do the top 10 most unusual phobias, and I'm going to preface this is a lot of scientific wordy words that I will probably mispronounce. So I'm going to do my best, but be warned because I will mispronounce them. I'm not even going to probably mispronounce them. I'm going to. I predict it.
One of my favorite jokes about phobia is that my psychiatrist told me I had a fear of giants. We called it fee-fi phobia.
That's good.
I like that joke. I appreciate it. Okay. So, ablutophobia is the fear of bathing. Though common in adults, many toddlers experience bathing fears for the first few weeks or months as part of their development. In adults, ablutophobia may be related to early water-related trauma and can cause social problems due to hygiene issues. Shocking!
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was like an episode of The Norm Show because, they were all social workers. And there was one guy that was like afraid of water and like everybody was scared to be in the room with him because he smelled so bad.
Yeah. Oh.
If you had this kind of fear, would you not how afraid of water? If you're afraid of drowning in a puddle or something like that, I can get that. Yeah. But putting water on a sponge, for example, to give yourself some kind of a sponge bath, is that something that they'd be afraid of?
They don't like water on their skin.
Yeah,
it's at all. Yeah.
Oh.
And they'll avoid it. Like they will, if there's like a stream or even just like water running in a sink, they will try to avoid it as much as possible because it creates such an anxiety response.
Damn.
Weird, yeah.
Wet wipes. Use wet wipes.
Wet wipes, yes, because that will definitely get you more clean than taking a sink.
How can you be afraid of something you literally need to survive?
You can't go to 2 to 3 days without drinking water. So
the body is 70% water, but yet as a species, we prefer to remain dry. Right?
That is true. That is kind of a.
It's only when the water leaks out that we tend to be a little bit distressed about it.
Yeah.
Moving on. So this is oh my god, esotrophophobia. S-S-O. Fine. It's the fear of mirrors. It's the fear of mirrors.
Mirror phobia. Got it.
Yeah, you're mirror phobic. This may stem from a superstitious ideas about mirrors, self-image issues, or scenes from horror movies like Candyman or Shining. Remember Red Rum?
Yeah.
By the way, if you say Brent Lee in the mirror 3 times, you become a patron of the show.
That's what happens.
Automatically.
You want to donate money. You do.
I can this linked automatically to the show.
I can see this though if you have like body dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia.
Like if you have these contortions in your brain about how your body looks and stuff like that, I would understand you want to avoid mirrors because then you're gonna self-obsess about like perceived flaws and stuff like that. So I can totally see this being, a fear. Or when I believed in woo stuff, I thought that mirrors were portals that demons could come through. So when you believe in like weird shit,
oh yeah, the old demon.
Like if you think, because we've seen plenty of horror movies where bad things come through mirrors.
Yeah.
Okay.
The movie Mirrors has demons come out of the mirror, and it's
that movie Oculus is also the whole horror movie is based on the premise that there is an evil mirror.
That's right. And they kind of seem like portals too, if you think, especially if you turn one on itself on another one, and it just bounces back and forth forever.
It feels like it's a door to another room.
Yeah. So
it's
I
like
get it.
A visual representation of infinity.
That's right.
Sorry.
So chatophobia is the fear of hair. People with this phobia often fear other people's hair and sometimes even animal hair. They may avoid people with thick, curly locks. Sorry, Dawn. Or necessarily fear loose, stray hair. Some may believe hair is dirty and that contact with it might make them sick. Others develop this phobia after struggling with scalp issues or hair loss. Now, to be fair, there is a difference. If your hair is on your head, you don't tend to think of it as dirty, but as soon as it hits the floor, it's contaminated, and we're all like sweeping it up, like we're just like gross. So,
yes,
and that's just something we do naturally. I can't imagine being completely freaked out by hair.
We have dogs, so there's like tumbleweeds of hair going in there.
On a black floor.
On the black floor, yeah.
That's funny.
So you just ask people, like, if they start avoiding, it's like, is it my hair? Is that why you're afraid of me? So linophobia is the fear of string. Sadly, this may result from having been tied up against someone's will. I can see this definitely as a childhood trauma. Yeah. People may experience extreme fear of yarn, rope, shoelaces, and other materials resembling string. So this one makes me, I can't really make fun of this one because it just makes me sad.
You can develop that, especially when you tie your shoelaces and you tie it in a knot and you can't get them undone. It's like, God damn it.
I hate that.
Listen, my husband has been, he was a fisherman and he has the patience to untime like fishing line. So whenever I get knots in my jewelry or anything, I'm like, can you fix this for me? Because you have way more patience than I do. Side thing. Anyway, so this is, okay. Hippopottomonstrosis's quidodalophobia. Fear of long words.
Like hippopotami.
Whoever came up with this, like, I like his sense of humor. That's great. Also known as sesquipedalophobia. This fear may be better accounted for by social phobia because it involves fear of embarrassing oneself with pronouncing long words. I don't have that fear.
Wait.
I own my mispronunciation. Thank you very much. I own it. Oh my God. Omphalophobia is the fear of belly buttons.
That sucks to be afraid of something that's on your body. Like,
Yeah,
get it off. Just cover it up then. I don't know.
people with this fear may avoid the beach, swimming in pools, or other places where exposure is likely. In severe cases, they may cover up their own belly buttons with tape or bandages. I don't know how this would develop. Like, I don't know, because it's like everybody has one. Like, there's no human. This is how you know there's aliens. People, if they don't have a belly button, they're an alien.
Right.
Like
That's
Adam
how
and
you know.
Eve didn't have a better
Science.
Gotta check.
So could it have to do with something of like, well, dirt will accumulate in your belly button, and sometimes it's very hard to get rid of or to clean, and maybe that's one of the fear that things that generate
Bacteria and like maybe
Yeah.
it's an OCD thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
Maybe, yeah.
that's possible.
use a vacuum cleaner.
Just a vacuum.
Like,
Ouch.
get out.
That would hurt, but okay.
But it's clean.
Unless that's your kink, and we don't
Feel
kink
it.
shame on the show.
I can actually feel it. I'm like, oh, Making me sick.
Lactanophobia is the fear of vegetables.
Oh, I have that.
Now,
every
to-
kid has
like,
that.
So people with this phobia may endure extreme anxiety when seeing or even thinking about vegetables. I cannot imagine going to the fucking grocery store then, man.
Right? Or watching Veggie Tales. Like,
and then they go into like a cult.
fuck Larry.
Yeah, that cycle is all mine.
They're like those cats when you put down cucumbers and they like jump. Like,
Yeah. They look so funny when they get scared. That's awesome. Yeah, that's weird. What a
it is really weird because I have to imagine this be really difficult to avoid. Like, because you have to, people eat vegetables. I eat them every day. Like,
But if you watch Return of the Killer Tomatoes, that movie had a deep impact.
that's right.
what it
that's,
was.
That's
Yeah.
what.
In the subsequent
There's
part
only
two.
amount of time for the vegetable uprising. They're going to bring sentience and
Pretty soon.
it's only a matter of time.
Some of the experience today on some people, they're pretty much in a vegetative state already.
So this is all over the internet. Trypophobia was a fear of closely packed holes like bubble wrap, honeycomb, seed pods, etc. Some research suggests that's less a fear about the holes and about an unconscious association between harmless objects with dangerous animals because they share certain features.
Or like honeycombs and beehives kind of thing.
I'm sorry, what?
Like honeycombs and beehives kind of thing.
Well, and I also think too is like spotted animals, like cheetahs and like predators, may have this like unconscious act of our brains. We like a good pattern to bring together to protect ourselves. So I think it might come from that because a lot of predators tend to have stripes or whole, spots and stuff like that, and they can blend in with the environment really well. So it might be something related to that, something in our, ape brain.
Okay, makes sense.
Which makes sense if you
I
think
can
about
see
it. Like
that.
it doesn't bother me. I'm just like it's just holes. So,
Terrified of cheese, It's just
that's right. Swiss cheese
Scary.
is gonna fuck you up, man.
that Swiss shit. Get that out of here.
Okay, this one I can kind of I kind of agree with, which is globophobia, which is the fear of balloons. This fear often develops from past experience with pop balloons or traumatic events involving loud popping noises.
Yeah.
Like Oprah Winfrey is terrified of balloons. They really freak her out. She reason I don't like things that reminds me of gunfire.
Did you just say Oprah Winfrey's terrified of balloons?
She does not like balloons.
Really?
Freak her shit out.
She saw that movie In the Line of Fire with the balloon scene and
That's it. And she
You get a
saw
balloon.
it.
You get a
Really.
balloon.
You
Everybody
see a
gets
red
a balloon.
balloon, there's going to be a killer clown showing up.
Oh, I bet she hates that movie.
It all flowed down here, George.
I don't like balloon. Like this is like a thing for me. Like styrofoam and balloons. create a sensory, like I'm even talking about styrofoam right now and balloons, like is actually causing me to have a little bit of anxiety because the sound of it completely it gives the screechy, like, oh my god, like if I get like if I order something or I buy something and it's packed in styrofoam, I have to like have Todd take it out of the packaging and I have to go out of the house because the sound, or if someone's like blowing up balloons for like birthday parties and stuff, the sound of it it causes extreme anxiety. It's just a sensory thing. So I get it. You know, some people may not like the sound of popping balloons because like this does show up in people that have PTSD, especially like people like, you know, veterans and stuff like that dealt like popping balloons and, you know, fireworks will cause them to have an extreme stress response. So I get it. You know, I just can't stand the sound, like the touching of the. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about weird things that Helen's afraid of. So, nomophobia is the fear of being without a phone.
That must be a new one.
No mobile. With those of us funny. That, you know, we're all addicted to our telephones, you know, but I don't have severe anxiety if I don't have my phone, but it's persistent and or if you have a dead battery or not having cell service. So I can see that developing in the modern world. Especially like
the fear of not being
because those of us who are older, we remember a time when we didn't have cell phones. So we know there was a time where like, well, I spent 20 plus years of my life without a phone. You know, I can revert back. But if you're maybe someone that's always had a phone, you know, I can see that, you know, turning into some unrealistic fear of being without a phone, you know.
Well, it's like I used to be afraid, like every single time I would get into a car that had like a one of the seat belts were broken or something like that. I was always like, oh, this is it. This is the time when I get in the car accident and I die.
Right.
There's no seat belt this time. You know, and I wonder if it's something similar to that, where they're just like, oh, now it's dead. Now I'm going to get murdered.
I'm going to get trapped in a snowstorm on the highway and nobody will be able to come to rescue me. I'm going to freeze to death.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's an addiction. Whenever you get on it, like your phone, it's a full addiction because I went through it. I lived my life. I ran a business from my phone. So I was on my phone every waking moment of the day. And then it became such a habit when I went to put it away, or if I left my house, I would get halfway to where I was going and go, shit, my phone. And I would drive all the way back for my phone, even though by the time I got home to grab the phone and back to the store, I would have been with my stuff at home already. But, and knowing that consciously, I'm now leaving my phone purposely. I try and leave it alone when Kevin and I do stuff.
I hide it.
We went out one time to the grocery store, and I left my phone, and I'm like, shit, I left my phone. It meant he had to pay because I have tap on my phone.
That's very convenient. That's very convenient.
Did you really forget it, Don? Did you really forget your phone?
A lot. You know what? I forgot my phone again and my wallet. And
my credit cards. I forgot everything. Isn't that weird? We're going out for sushi.
Yeah,
it's weird. I hardly ever use it.
You're addicted to it, and then you are. It's like any other addiction. Once you're aware you're addicted, then you can start breaking those habits, and then it's not so much of a phobia to not have your phone anymore.
All right.
I wonder if it got worse.
I gotta rein this back in. We gotta finish that the top 10 list here.
I wonder if it got worse after COVID because we were all doom scrolling during COVID and during when we're all in isolation, and then now that we don't have to do that so much, people are so
people would rather be on their phones than face to face now.
Welcome to the Psychology Hour with Helen and Dawn. We'll take in your phone calls.
I'm going to be an armchair psychologist about phone addiction.
We're taking your phone calls any minute now, unless you forgot your phone at home. And at that point, we're not taking your phone.
Okay, let's move on before we keep going into the psychology of phone addiction.
It gets deep.
I'm done. I'm done now. That was number 10.
Oh, that was
I'm
one.
finished.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
All
Come
right.
on.
Thank you so much.
Silence.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
I'm not good at
You're
counting.
welcome.
You know,
That's why I'm here.
So- All right, things that make you go. All right, what do we got for you today?
Okay, German ballet company suspends director for smearing feces in critic's face.
What?
Yeah,
A German ballet director smeared feces on his critic's face?
yeah.
Wow, talk about a shitty argument.
A German newspaper critic had animal feces smeared on her face by a ballet director in the city of Hanover after they apparently took offense at a review she wrote.
Did he do a trebuchet before he smeared it on
I know.
the
Kicked it with the pointed toes, you know. Jesus.
I'm going to brutal some words in here. So, the Daily Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reported that
That sounds like a fake newspaper. The Daily Frankfurter? The Daily Frankfurter?
Sounds like a hot dog newspaper. Come on.
That's what gave you the runs. Like, you know, he smeared the feces after that.
The Daily Frankfurter reported that a furious Goic approached its dance critic, Wybeck Heister, during the interval of a premiere at a Hanover's Opera House on Saturday and asked what she was doing there. It said that the two didn't know each other personally. The newspaper said that Goic, who apparently felt provoked by a recent review she wrote of a production he staged in the Dutch seat of government.
Damn.
Wow.
So he didn't like the review she wrote, and his reply to that, instead of countering, going over, selling the argument, was
No.
smear shit in her face.
Yeah. Shit pie face.
That seems reasonable.
That's
Fair.
I
What
know.
decent people do.
I mean, we do it figuratively all the time. We just don't do it literally, you know.
Yeah, well, that to me just proves that we're half a chromosome away from chimpanzees, because that's like a chimpanzee reaction.
Right.
That's how they show dominance.
That
They
is
go
true.
poo at each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I can see chimpanzees doing ballet all the time. Yeah, I can see that.
That would actually be very entertaining. I would think
Hey,
On Lake.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so gross. Anyway, keep going.
Hagu threatened to ban her from the ballet and accused her of being responsible for people canceling season tickets in Hanover. He then pulled out a paper bag with animal feces and smeared her face with the contents before
He
making
was
his
prepared with this. He was prepared for this.
he wrote it on the bus the whole way
He's like,
there.
I'm just gonna wait for my dog to take a shit.
I was kind of half expecting he would take her to the bathroom and just put her head in the toilet or something. No, he had a bag ready for this.
Thought this out and knew where she was gonna be. Like, this is crazy.
How do you explain that on the bus? On the way up? No, it's cool. It's for later. It's just in case. Anyway, it's you'll see.
It's
Keep an eye on the news.
not for you. It's for my critic.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure she's going to give him a glorious review after this, right?
Yeah, because that's how you win people over. Is you spread shit in their faces.
Oh, wow!
That's how we all became friends. Really.
her face.
Well, it all happened on the podcast. I decided to stop doing that to them and decided, it won't come on the podcast.
Yeah, it was just a shit show, you know.
Oh, he then pulled
Anyway,
out a
keep
paper
going
bag
on. I'm so intrigued.
and smeared her face with the contents before making his way off through a packed theater foyer, the newspaper said. Hoyster identified the substance as dog feces and said she had filed a criminal complaint, German news agency DPA reported. In a statement posted on its website, the Opera House said that Heister's personal integrity was violated in an unspeakable way. It said that it contacted her. It contacted her immediately after the incident to apologize. It said that Goek's impulsive reaction violated the ground rules of the theater, and that he caused massive damage to the Hanover State Opera and State Ballet. As a result, it said he is being suspended and banned from the opera.
No.
So, in case you didn't know where that red line was drawn, feces in theater is where the line is drawn.
But it was dog feces, so could it be another animal's feces, or even
Was he out in the woods, like looking for like a deer?
No, it's a deer kind. It's cool. It's cool.
Right now, Dr. Firth is in the green room, and he's looking at this and thinking, "Oh, you know what the hell did I do coming on this show?"
I gotta go. I gotta clean up my fridge. I gotta go.
Welcome to the show where we talk about.
Oh, that is.
No, Goek has been given the next few days to apologize comprehensively and explain himself to the theater management before further steps are initiated.
I want to hear that explanation. I want to hear the explanation. Where he thought this
I
was
want to
gonna-
be a fly on that wall.
Yeah, where did this guy think this was gonna go? Oh man. Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Sean, for that.
That's hilarious.
Brent, can we do your thing after Dr. Firth?
Yeah, we could probably do that.
Okay, we'll just do.
Oh
let's do
wait,
that.
I might just have to do it next week. I'm sorry, or I don't know. Yeah, because I got a secular rarity coming on.
Okay,
Afterwards.
let me know if we can or if we can. All right, let's take a quick pause, and when we come back, we'll be hopefully back with Dr. Firth and talk about a human history of emotion. So stay with us.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am honored to introduce someone that I consider my friend. Dr. Richard Firth Gobier is one of the leading experts on emotion. He is a distinguished professor of liberal arts and humanities at Wilson University and an honorary research fellow at the Center for the History of Emotions, Queen Mary University of London. His award-winning interdisciplinary research walks the line between history, psychology, linguistics, philosophy, and futurism. He examines how understandings of emotions change over time and space, and how these things can influence the wider world. Already translated into over 20 languages, Richard's latest book, A Human History of Emotions: How the Way We Feel Built the World We Know, is available from all good bookstores. So, welcome, Richard. Thank you for being on my podcast. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you're here, man. Thank you.
No problem.
Excellent.
Always up for a
Thank you
chat.
so much for joining us, Dr. Firth. I really appreciate that, and especially for being brave to join us after that dog feces story we just did.
Oh yeah, no worries. I've said before, my early research. In fact, in my field, apparently, when everybody thinks of disgust, they think of me. I've been told. I don't know what that means, but it is something that I've got quite a good knowledge of, and so dog shit is right up my alley. I think about it, but yeah, it's kind of my thing.
5 points for Dr. Firth right off the bat.
Well, I'm glad you fit right in here, man.
Yeah, you'll fit right in. We're talking today about a human history of emotion. Now, this could take us so many places here. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, what prompted you to write about this topic?
It's a long story. It begins with the woman who's now my wife, who has something called emetophobia, which is a phobia of vomiting and being near people who are sick, who are being sick. And I wanted to understand it because she's had a lot of therapy since, and it's much less a problem, but it was kind of dominating her life quite a bit at the time. But I was doing a degree in history, so I didn't really have any way of studying it. And then I found there's this thing called the history of emotions. And I wrote an essay on witchcraft and the role of disgust. And this is way back, adjacent to the last ice age. And I handed it in, and when it came back, I got, "Wow, you should publish this," and a really high mark. And I thought, I found my niche. Yeah. And so I have been plowing that particular furrow ever since. And I just interested in the whole thing. Of course, that takes you into the study of other areas of emotion, which is the constantly arguing psychological element and the philosophy and all that kind of area. And I pursued it through his PhD, and I'm still doing it now. And then the book exists because whenever I say I do history of emotion, everyone goes, "Say what?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to introduce, because everything written pretty much is very academic, very hard to read is the best way of putting it. I wanted to write something that anyone could read. You could sit on the beach and read about an African queen who told her male soldiers that they ought to swap their loincloths for her undergarments because they were weak and wouldn't fight the British and things like that. So I'll tell these stories. So that's why the book exists.
That's awesome.
It's interesting that when we think of academia, we think exactly what you were just referring to. Very dry, very like Spock-like logical facts and numbers and stuff like that. So to write about a history, especially a history of human emotion, my God, I mean, where does somebody start with something like this?
It's actually, I mean, it kind of, there's lots of different ways you can look at it. And one way looking at it, and one way I've done quite a bit, is you look at it as how did people understand what feelings were? How did they categorize them? What's the history, if you like, the history of the science of emotion? It goes way back, as far as we know, to probably Egyptians who had something called the Book of the Heart that explained how you are supposed to express yourself during certain emotional times and what they thought emotions were. And through the Greeks and so on, and there's ancient Chinese writings and Japanese writings and so on. So that's one way, like a history of science, if you like. Another way is to try and work out what people actually felt and how they expressed it, which is more difficult because people tend not to be quite as forthcoming as they are now. We're in a very emotional age where people are writing about their feelings all the time, but that hasn't always been the case. So there are things like, there's some good descriptions of how ancient Hebrews understood emotions in the Bible. For example, they're very good at saying, well, it's this bit of my body, you know, the spleen is where I feel anger, and the heart is where I feel joy, and that kind of thing. So you can kind of trace it. And there are people who do things like the history of emotional objects. So one of my colleagues has looked at things that were left behind by mothers who were giving up their children to orphanages, even though they weren't technically orphans, because they couldn't look after them, but left just something of themselves behind for the son or daughter as a link, and then what that meant and how these objects changed over time. There's all sorts of ways you could look at it. Like any other history, it's just you look at one particular facet.
That's very interesting. I think we might as well dive into one of them. I think the one I'd be interested in hearing about is how did, maybe not proto-humans, but I don't know how far back the research goes, early humans, early Homo sapiens started describing feelings. How do they explain that to themselves?
Well, we don't have much, obviously, writing. Prehistory is prehistory. It's called that because we don't write. But what we do have is art. We have a lot of art. We have a lot of depictions of scenes, fight with animals. We have necklaces, and a necklace and other kind of body art that exists for emotional reasons. You don't create one of those things for anything rational. You create it because it makes you or someone else feel good. It's a gift, or it's something for yourself to make you feel better or look better, which has an emotional element. So you can look at that. You can look at cave paintings. You can look at things that are left behind. You can perhaps work out ritual practices and how that may have had an emotional effect. Sometimes going somewhere prehistoric and going, you might get a sense of how it was supposed to make you feel. Not necessarily, because feelings change over time, which is one of the weird things you find out as a historian of it. But you can kind of go to, say, Stonehenge at solstice and go, yeah, this is kind of amazing. I can imagine everybody here looking at that light coming through those rocks and feeling pretty much as I do. So yeah, proto-humans are kind of hard to track, but there's little elements here and there.
In your research, has there been a period in history? Because I feel that right now, in this present day, we are at a seem to me like a tipping point where we're trying to actually really take seriously the study of emotions and how they affect us psychologically. But there must have been at some point in the past where controlling people and telling them how they should feel was a way to manipulate people. Was that something that comes up in your research?
Oh yeah, I mean, it always has been. There's always been there. Aristotle's rhetoric was exactly that. It was, this is how you get people, convince people of your arguments using emotions and get them to do what you want to do. I mean, there are records of Alexander the Great, Aristotle's great student, using that to wind up his enemies and get them to be frightened of him and things, and it's kind of always been around in the sort of 16th, 17th centuries. You get what are known as manners manuals, which tell you how you should behave and how you should use your emotions in certain circumstances. Machiavelli's The Prince is that as well. This is how fear can control people. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, there's a long history of how to use emotions to manipulate or guide people. There's a habit of psychology and other areas liking to put sciencey labels on things that have been around for thousands of years. And recently it's emotional intelligence, which is exactly the same stuff as Aristotle was talking about. There's no real difference between modern emotional intelligence and the whole Gardner and that kind of ideas of controlling your emotions and understanding them so that you can then control the emotions of others. Well, yeah, that's what Aristotle's writing about in rhetoric. And all the people after him are writing about that. And that ancient Egyptian papyrus I was talking about, the Book of the Heart, that kind of talks about that as well. But yeah, we like to science things up occasionally. So it's an ongoing thing.
Wow. Guys, I don't want to be the only one to ask you questions here. I don't want to.
I have a question.
Jump in.
So you mentioned how science is it can be dry. Like I've read academic papers, and it is hard to absorb because there is no emotional language in it. So, but for things like religious faith and things that rely on those emotions, do you think that's part why certain people have a harder time understanding how science is done and talked about, because it is hard to bring emotion when you're talking about like how black holes work, So I'm just curious of how that kind of may keep people from wanting to absorb educational information, especially about science and certain subjects.
Yeah. To me, that is why public science and science communication is really important, because within academia, if I write an academic paper, you won't want to read it. Neither will I, frankly, but it's got to be that way. It's got to be this is how it is. These are the facts. This is what I've done. This is the research. I can show you this, this, and this, and this. And if you put in a joke, the first thing you get from your peer review is that a joke or is that an actual fact that you're trying to demonstrate? And you go, you cannot be that stupid. But you have to, of course, take the joke out. Professor. But believe me. So there's that. But then there's this other side, which is science communication. And that's when you can start to get excited about these things and put in jokes and put in the passion and things that people like Brian Cox, Professor Brian Cox, who does brilliant documentaries about space, where he'll stand and look at the sky and go, "Isn't it beautiful?" for quite a lot. And you go, yeah, it is. And you need that. I think it's so important to have these two elements. And there are some academics who are really snooty about science education. I think because they're crap at it, but don't quote me. Oh, I've said it already. You're going to quote me on that. But anyway, really snooty about it, but yeah.
He's talking about you, person.
You. Come as high as my finger winds. Yeah, they know who I'm talking about. Come on. But yeah, I think that's the important element. There needs to be these two sides. There needs to be the dry academic side. There needs to be people like me who prefer to quote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the middle of a chapter about love. So it's
hell yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, Dr. Rich, I'm going to push back just a tad here as a layperson, because I understand what you're talking about here. I mean, the classic example is Bill Nye. Bill Nye made science fun. Steve Irwin made conservation fun. Brian Cox, like you said yourself. So why do we actually, but you just said we need also that dry side of just facts. Why do we really need that? Because it seems to me, if we're going to bring science to the masses, and there needs to be somehow an emotional component there, then why do we need the dry side to be there?
I think the dry side is the side that the general public outside of academia doesn't ever want to have to be subjected to. It's where all the bickering and the arguments and the stress and the hassle takes place so that we can arrive at a point where we can then do something that a more mass audience will enjoy. Because what they don't want to read is well, actually, that's not strictly true. I have written books and do write books about how people in my field are constantly at war with each other, because they are. But what it's more that I think people want to read something. People who aren't in academia don't necessarily want to have to. It's a hard slog, a lot of academic papers, and actually, I am of the opinion that really they ought to lighten up, and academic papers ought to be a little bit less stuffy and a little bit less boring. And you go from this extreme of academic papers that are fun and readable, but not particularly, no one would publish it. You wouldn't get Penguin publishing that kind of language, through to these people who all they want to do is sound clever, and you can't understand a word of it. You read every paragraph 6 times because every word they should use, they don't. They get a thesaurus out and go right to the bottom of the list and use that one instead. And you're like, oh.
Jordan Peterson, this shit, that's.
Peterson's actually quite a good communicator. He communicates things that I would call crap and maybe also bollocks, but he is a good communicator. Hence, him selling more books than the Bible, frankly. But there are others. There are people out there who frustrate me because I've seen them give talks. And their talks are wonderful, talks to the public, and they clarify what they mean, and it's great. And then you get their work, and you read it, and you go, I study this. It's my field, and I don't know what you just wrote there.
I just had $1 million idea. We're just going to do like a Game of Thrones kind of series of scientists versus other scientists, the communicators versus the dry guys, and they're just going to battle around. I think that'd be a great series.
To a battle royale of scientists and academics, communicators.
Geologists always win, though, so it's
fair.
Yeah. The thing is, there's a lot of good science. Go ahead, Gary.
I could also understand why some of the scientists would get miffed at science communicators, because it seems to me whenever there's an article about science that gravitates to people, it's always about new science. If we have to rewrite the entire history of this, rewrite the entire history of that, we have to really think about everything. And it's not
there is good and there is bad science communication. And unfortunately, a massive chunk of science communication isn't done by people in any particularly scientific or humanities field. It's done by journalists who get some kind of press release from a scientist and go, how can we make everybody excited about this? Well, we've either got to say outrage as, we've got to say changes science forever, or admits Einstein was wrong. It's always Einstein was wrong. It's like Einstein knew he was wrong. He couldn't understand black holes. He said it at the time. And it's that kind of stuff. I think all of us who are more into trying to be more accurate with our science communication and don't want to just big everything up as being insanely exciting. Wow. It frustrates us, especially when something genuinely amazing happens. Like at the moment, I've got colleagues in astronomy who are really excited that the James Webb Telescope is really messing up how to date the universe and how galaxies should be. And that is actually a science paradigm-changing bit of data. But if they say that, everyone goes, oh, yeah, that again. I've heard that before. You know, it can be really annoying.
It seems this also needs to be like done on the presentation and packaging, right? I mean, everybody remembers and knows when I say Hubble.
Yeah.
But the James Webb Telescope, which is a much superior telescope, that's right there, right now. Nobody really seems to think about it. It's like, well, who cares? I don't know. Yeah, something about the word Hubble and James Webb. that doesn't jive for some reason.
I don't know. I think James Webb's in the middle of doing some actual science right now. And occasionally, just like Hubble, it'll break away and do some image that makes everyone's jaw drop and everyone will remember it again. Hubble's been around for a long, long time. And it's got 24 images that take your breath away. But it took millions. And most of them were from very dry astronomers sat in rooms with calculators working numbers out. We don't see all that. And James Webb's doing that now. He's doing the actual science stuff. James Webb, for example, there's a non-zero chance James Webb will find a planet with an Earth-like atmosphere. That will make everyone remember its name. Things like that, you know.
Yeah.
Because I also think, too, that we are very distractible creatures. just gonna say it. And we're well, because that's just the way we are. And I think when the James Webb telescope was launched, I was like, this is incredible and it's great. And occasionally I have to be reminded that, it's actually doing, it's just not taking pretty pictures of the cosmos, that it's actually there to help researchers understand the universe. Yeah. But I think for laymen like us who aren't really thinking about how old the universe is and rethinking these ideas, because I'm not an astronomer, and so I'm a human resource person. So if you're not thinking about it, and I think, but to have those moments of awe that invoke emotions within us, if that leads to an interest in wanting to study, how those things came to be, to exist, I think that to have an interest in anything, you have to have some kind of emotional depth to it. Like I wouldn't have gotten interested in psychology if I didn't have some emotional investment in it.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have that. That's the thing. It's I actually had a guy at a talk recently, and he told me that there was no link whatsoever between reason and emotion, and that it was absolute nonsense to suggest something like emotional intelligence exists and that you do anything. And then he uttered the phrase that made me laugh. He said, for example, I really love calculus. Right. You do what now? What do you do about calculus? Come on. Because I love it. I went, was that a rational idea that you would love calculus? And it took him a minute. But he loves calculus.
Short in the goal where calculus touched you.
But we do things because we're passionate about them, because we love them. Otherwise we wouldn't do them. And emotion's a very, very complicated thing that guides most of our decisions all the time, because it's very, very, very fast. And our main bit of our brain, the rational bit of our brain, is very, very slow. So emotions exist slightly in the future, if you like. They're constantly predicting things all the time. They're predicting this, they're predicting that. So they're important. And people will say, oh, well, emotion doesn't matter. Everything I do through reason. And there'll always be a point when you prove them wrong. It's quite gratifying.
I appreciate that.
For a long time, I did martial arts for a long time, and there's a component of martial arts that basically trains you to use emotions to manipulate your opponent in situations like that. But so the manipulation of emotions or to control people has been around for a long time, obviously. But now that you're basically studying the history of that, how is studying the history of emotions helping us understand how modern day humans are interacting?
There's a few things. I mean, one thing from my favorite time in history, the early modern, is when we all freak out about the internet and how emotional it's making. As I say, you ought to read what people used to write about the printing press, ironically in print, but they did. The same way, ironically, you'll read a blog online about how terrible the internet is. You'll get these things. Print changed everything. Print made all sorts of ideas mainstream that wouldn't be mainstream, you know, weird shit like democracy, and all these ideas out there, fantastic stuff, because of the printing press. And it made emotions a bit weird for a while. People were writing about emotions not long after the printing press came out, not because they were going, everything's a bit weird, I don't understand, people are feeling strange, everything's mad. Because you've got to remember, not only did we have the printing press, but just before the printing press, America was discovered, and everyone went, this big continent we've just found, yeah, did Aristotle or the Bible mention it? And everyone went, no. I said, but I thought they knew everything. And everyone went, yes, so did we. Oh dear. So you've got that big freak out happening, which led to the scientific revolution and all that. And you've got disease, new and fine diseases. You've got new versions of Christianity trying to kill everybody and each other. You just got massive upheaval, and everyone can know about it because of the printing press. They can know about it quite quickly. They read it themselves, or someone in the village will read it to the village. Kind of what town criers and people like that used to do. And so I look at that and I see this turmoil, and I see how it eventually settled down, and it led to other things, and it led to the Enlightenment. And I see what people are saying now about the internet, and I go, you know what? We're at the beginning of a long phase. Everyone wants this sorted out, and for the kids to stop going crazy on the internet. Now, it's going to take a couple of centuries, everybody, before we settle into this and ease into it and get what's going on. Because we can look back in the past and see what happened last time. And we know how humans react to these things. So everybody just chill. We'll get there. Or we won't. But hopefully we'll get there. So that's one way.
I don't know if I'm as optimistic as you are, Doctor, because, you know, to me that, you know, just after COVID, you know, I just look at these pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918, and it seems we haven't learned a damn thing. Back then, of course, they called it a Bolshevik plot because nobody used communist, but even today, it's a communist plot, obviously. And so it seems to me we haven't really learned a thing. Is there any hope for us?
Yeah, but again, we see in the past that this thing happened and eventually found the Spanish flu settled down, and we now have a annual jab to keep the flu away, and those sort of conspiracy theorists seem to have mostly disappeared. They're a minority, and with COVID, eventually it'll settle down. It'll be that thing you get at winter, or you get periodically. And the only thing that worries me is I do realise that in the 17th century there weren't quite as many nuclear weapons hanging about, so there is that difference. That's why I say we might not get there, because somebody might not let us. But
that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. If there were nuclear weapons in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century, wouldn't be here now. Because the Catholics and the Protestants would have just wiped each other out in Europe. Actually, we would be here now. We just wouldn't be. Europe would be this tiny little smouldering mass, and America and China would be the biggest countries in the world. Oh, hang on, we are there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just be more Mad Max-ish, I think. That's you know.
Dr. Rich, we're an atheist show, and we deal with religious zealotry on a regular basis, and a lot of this zealotry we try to combat with reasoning, data, statistics, and stuff like that. But you know, from your study there, where you're studying about human emotion, a lot of people that are, for lack of a better word, stuck in the faith, this is their refuge. The emotional part of religion making them feel good is where they take refuge. Is there a way, or can we, as a species, go beyond that I need to feel good thing that makes me make irrational decisions?
Not in the way I think you're thinking of stopping them feeling good. I think what normally happens, and people who have deconverted can correct me on this, but what normally happens is there's a moment, there's growing little flecks of doubt, things that just don't seem to add up, things that aren't right. But all that time you cling to your emotional identity, which is as a Christian or as a Jew or as a Buddhist or whatever, because that's who you are. So obviously these doubts, you can resolve them, and then you pull the thread and the jumper keeps unraveling, and you keep pulling it and you keep pulling it. And it comes to a point where you have to recognize that there is no jumper. It's all nonsense. The emperor is naked, as it were. And But I think that usually one of the best ways for people to cross that line and just say, I'm an atheist, aren't I? Is to give them an alternative place to feel good. I'm a really big believer in that, to give them another community they can be part of. Because oxytocin's a bitch. Oxytocin is we call it the love drug, but it's the drug that is about belonging and about groups and about when you're with people you're close to, you've released a lot of it. It's a pesky neuropeptide that leads to marriage and groups and family and all that. And when you're with your church group and you're religious, you are flooded with oxytocin. And you feel wonderful and you feel good because you've got this group around you. You need to direct that same chemical reaction to another group, which is why a lot of the atheist communities out there, I think, are really great, because there's that group you can move to. And why quite often talk shows and podcasts and all that kind of stuff about atheists, you'll have people call in quite a lot. And then one day you'll find out, well, I deconverted because of your show. It's because there's a group out there. There's a new group to which they can belong, and belongingness is really strong, really important to humanity. We're basically a herd species, so it's getting them from that herd to that herd, and getting those doubts, not just the doubts, not just getting them to accept those doubts are valid, but that actually there's another group over here that know they're valid and are there for them. We're all there for you when you worked it out.
Because if you talk to people that go through the process, the reason why they stay is not because the evidence was compelling. It's because if I leave, I lose my social bonds.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is that we hear it over and over again. It has nothing to do with the logic. It is all those strong emotional bonds that you form with those people around you. And that has nothing to do with reason. That's because I don't want to be alone. The social rejection, all that stuff that goes with it.
It's really hard to move to the group, and there has to just be another group that they can move to, that they can have that new group there. And which is why things like the many atheist calling shows and all that kind of stuff are great, because it lets people know I'm not alone. There are these people who I can be a part of. The other one I come across quite a lot myself is people who are still frightened of hell long after they've admitted they're atheists. They're terrified of hell. And that's a harder one, because you can't really say there's a group over there who don't believe in hell. They go, yeah, I'm already part of that group. I'm still terrified. All I can suggest to people is, convince them that there is no spoon. It's the only way. Keep telling them the trick is there is no hell, And I've tried logical arguments on people who have that fear, but fear is another one that is, it's a very old, very powerful set of affects that we have, and it can happen without any of our prefrontal cortex or any of our cortical structures caring. It'll just happen, and you'll be frightened, and you'll want to run or freeze or fight before you can do anything about it. More than, I think the biggest problem is not so much you get into a new group, it's that lingering thing that I'm still struggling with, how to pop the hell balloon. For lack of a better phrase.
It's ironic, because it's telling us that you need to almost have an emotional component to bring people out of an emotional trap in a way, right?
Yeah.
Which it's a bit like using your own strength to beat something. I'm not.
But there's a reason why. There's a reason why there's a popular phrase: "Win hearts and minds." It's not just win minds. You got to win the hearts and minds. And part of winning that hearts is say, "Come to our club. Our club is better." We've got all the best drinks, which is absolutely true. Wine and a wafer that they claim is flesh, even though I've never had a steak that sticks to the top of my mouth like that, so it's definitely not flesh. That's rubbish. Come where we are, much better food. You can have a real steak and real wine.
That's right.
So I guess now we've looked a bit of prehistoric emotions, and we've looked into history of emotions, but now I guess it comes to a point in your book where you'll be talking about modern day adaptations and how people are dealing with emotions, and what science studies essentially emotion. What can you tell us about this time right now that we're looking into what science is looking into the emotional side of people?
Science of emotions is a big old battleground, and the battleground has recently changed. Until recently, there were two camps. One camp were there are basic emotions that all humans share, and they're evolved and they're universal and they come through evolution. And another camp that said, no. We've spotted all these weird emotions, like there's an emotion called Fago that the Afaluk people have that we can't really translate. I've written a 60,000 page book trying to translate it, but we don't get it in the West. So we think they're social, they're constructed socially. And that was the battle. Mm-hmm. But recently, someone's come along and said, hang on, we do evolve core affect. We evolve feelings that guide us, that are very quick feelings, like basically what I've called fear. But we also have all this cultural stuff as well that gives those feelings meaning and makes us understand them and process them. We actually construct emotions in our brain using the whole brain. There's not just a fear pathway. There's a fear pathway. Then there's the fear pathway that says, is that a bear? I think there's a bear in that bush. And then there's a pathway that goes, nah, it's not a bear. It's Derek from down the road gardening. And lets you get past it. You know, all that. There's this huge component of memory and upbringing that's just as important as the feeling. That also, and that side also says, when we give a name to an emotion, fear, anger, hate, we're giving it in our language. And actually other languages pin them slightly differently. And emotions are basically how strong or how much you want to do something or not do something, and how good or bad it feels. And there's a grid, if you like, sort of good and bad, feeling good and bad, and weak and strong action. And every different language and every different culture puts pins in slightly different places. So an example of that, the German word Ekel, which means disgust, 200 years ago would be used if somebody tickled you. You'd be like, ugh, like that. But that doesn't compute in an English speaker's mind. It doesn't mean that's like, no, that's not disgust. There's a slightly different understanding of that feeling, that quite unpleasant feeling that makes you want to move away from something. So now the battle is between the people who believe that and the people who say, no, emotions are just those pathways, a stimulus and a response. It's just very, very simple and very basic and very evolved. This stuff's just window dressing. I believe they're both looking at the same cake and they're looking at different layers of the cake and saying, I know the cake. And what they need to do is go, hang on, it is all this evolved stuff in these pathways with all this cultural stuff. But that's me. I'm out there trying to be sensible, and they'd rather just have really nasty Twitter arguments, which I've seen quite.
You're making enemies on both sides. You're making enemies on both sides, Dr. Rich.
I'm trying to, yes. I like that. I prefer it that way.
That's very interesting. And for a longer time, also, human emotion was, or emotion altogether was just simply believed to be a human phenomenon.
Yes.
But today, you attribute emotions also to a whole bunch of different species. I mean, how far has the science evolved in that?
Well, there's actually, it depends who you talk to, but there's this is one of the places where the two sides absolutely agree, by the way, which is almost everything. They agree on almost everything. The side that says that it's just window dressing, still think the window dressing's there, right? And the side that thinks it's the window dressing matters, still think the pathways are there. This is what does my head in. They actually agree on more than they don't. Well, one thing they agree on is the idea that emotions are, I'll take a cat, my cat, your cat, whoever's cat. How does that cat know how to do things? How does it know to come and get you for food? How does it know to want to go outside? In my case, knock on our patio door until we let it out. How does it know that? Well, it doesn't have a written language. It can't have a part of its brain that's thinking, I'd like to go outside now, or I'm hungry, I'm going to get them. It feels it. It feels like it wants to go outside. So emotions kind of now been understood as how creatures navigate the world before they have a complex language to navigate it with, how they know stuff, which makes it a kind of, there's one guy called Mark Solms who says that means it's consciousness. If you can feel something in order to do something, that's a kind of consciousness. Not necessarily sentience, you separate sentience for those with language, but consciousness. You know through a feeling that you all want to eat. Therefore, you know. Which opens a bit of a can of worms, because you can then go way, way, way back and say, well, the first microbes knew that they had to go and get those nutrients from that jet is that a feeling? Is that some kind of consciousness? And then it gets all a bit. Then the argument starts up against no, just mammals. Why mammals? I think birds as well. You know, pick a line. But
it also kind of worms to saying you're essentially saying that your cat, for example, does not have an internal monologue. Is what you're saying?
No,
right? It just has a feeling
or anything. No internal monologue or anything like that. It's not just an internal monologue. It's this sort of understanding of the world that language will give you. Though humans don't have an internal monologue, but they still have this kind of way of thinking through pictures and images that are created very much through language. But cats don't necessarily have that. They don't have as complicated poor things have complicated the prefrontal cortex or cortisol structure as we do. So they more have that feeling. Most of their brain is about feeling hungry, feeling cold, feeling annoyed because something's wrong. So they'll act out.
A lot of annoyed feeling in cats.
That's why they push all the stuff off the ledges and stuff.
Or they ignore you when you call them and they're just like, you see their ear move, but they're just like, no. I'm not responding to you.
It's like, not today. I'm feeling other ways. I feel other things. I don't feel you. And you know, when they do come finally and sit on your lap, they want to feel safe. That's kind of this feeling of safety that they want. They're seeking safety. There's a guy called Jacques Pansket, brilliant guy. He died about 2 years ago, and he had his own set of very basic. He called them many things, but one of them was prototypical affective states. And he believed that all mammals had seeking and play. There was fear and there's things you recognize, but two of the things who were feelings were seeking, which is looking for stuff or trying to get it, seeking safety, and play, because play is how you learn to fight and to hunt. So we're all programmed to do it. So yeah, I quite like his ideas. But
that is interesting.
I'm wondering. I do have a question. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar, like, with determinism. How does that play into all this? Like, that we don't really make decisions like the way we think we do. We just kind of react, and then we work backwards to sort of justify what we already did anyway.
It's the whole thing, isn't it? Anything we do, try to do with our conscious minds takes 250 milliseconds. So how do we do it when we've got to do it instantly? Well, we can't. So our brains create heuristics and schemas that predict these things. And so we're doing it before we know we're doing it. I'm a musician. I know if I'm doing a gig, the second I think about what I'm playing, it all goes to shit every single time. I've just got to let it happen, let it flow. When I go, oh, there's an E coming up. Where shall I play that E chord? I'm suddenly playing an F and going, what the hell am I doing? And it's like, it's just... So you've got to let that happen. I think determinism's interesting because that suggests that there is no determinism. But of course, we learn those heuristics, and those heuristics, those guide us. They're not something that went wrong or right. We go, next time, this sort of, to simplify it, the subconscious will go, next time we'll do that again. Because and this is where emotions come in again, that felt right or that felt wrong. So next time we'll do that again. So I don't know where I stand on determinism, because it kind of suggests it is and kind of suggests it isn't. But also we do have a massive, great big prefrontal cortex on us that can take over and go, last time it felt bad, but I'm going to do it again anyway. You jump back in the icy water like an idiot and get frozen again. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Do we jump in? Would we have jumped in that for icy water anyway? Do we like feeling bad because we then feel good? Who knows? Are the stars just pinholes in the curtain of night? I'm going to Highlander here. I'll stop. But yeah, it's all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Oh, okay.
That is awesome. That's such a nebulous topic, but a fascinating one at the same time. I'm very intrigued by all this. So I guess the question I gotta ask you is, moving into the future and by looking into the past, I guess, what are we learning or what are we predicting is going to happen in the field of human emotion, I guess?
Human emotions, big beast right now is artificial emotions. Having your artificial intelligence also be emotional can't be good, can it? No. what, for example, there's a company, I'll not shame them, but they have created a system that monitors your emotions as you drive. And if you have road rage, it will take over the car and park you at the side of the road until you calm down. I can't think of a better way for me to smash a window through than my car take over when I'm angry. I don't want it to. But that's the idea. Safety. There are, and this is more alarming, right now in Russia and China, there are over 400 million CCTV cameras with face recognition software that tracks people's emotions. And it's there to make sure if you're going to do a crime, they can spot it. They can spot it from your facial expression.
So, Minority Report?
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
That's what it sounds like, emotional Minority Report.
Yeah, without the women in the ladies of the lake floating about and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. The problem is the science they're using is from 1971 and has been disproven 1,000 times. It's the science behind the film Inside Out by Disney. The idea that there are 6, or in the case of that film, 5 basic emotions, because they couldn't draw surprise and not make it look like disgust. That should tell you everything you need to know. 6 basic emotions. Let's see if I can remember these: happiness, anger, surprise, fear, sorrow, and anger, happiness. There's always one. Disgust, my one, of course. That's the idea, though. There's 6 basic emotions, and all humans pull the same face, except we don't. And we know we don't, and we've known since about 5 years after the initial experiment that supposedly proved it. But programming computers to look for 6 faces is a lot easier than programming it to look for millions and millions of different cultural diverse faces. So programmers quite like the idea of it taking them a weekend to program it rather than the rest of their lives. I get it. So, it's kind of, it's going that way. But the problem is then what we'll end up doing, I believe, is we'll all start having those 6 faces so that we don't get picked up by the police. Oh, by the way, they have been testing these cameras in the United States and the UK as well. So we're not safe. They've been tested.
Wow.
So, yeah. They tested them in an airport, and it was absolute catastrophe. There were loads of lawsuits and all sorts. But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was called the Spot program. So, yeah.
You'd have to reset the entire justice system, you know?
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like how they thought like the lie detector was going to be a good way to tell people lie. But the thing is, though, there's a bunch of things that are happening in the brain that have nothing to do with the physiological expression of like what happens when you lie. Like I could lie right now, like the sky is purple. You know, I just lied, you know, and I had no emotion about it whatsoever, you know, and I think that this sounds kind of like the same idea, you know, trying to have a simple way of explaining the complexities that goes on in our brain just by looking at somebody's fucking face.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolute nonsense. And it is very much like lie detector. It's the same kind of thing that lots of people are hailing it as a way to protect. Do you remember the TV series Lie to Me?
I was just going to bring that up. That's so funny.
Yeah. The guy who did the 1971 paper, Paul Ekman, was the consultant on Lie to Me, and the main character was based on him. Well, Paul Ekman is a kind of a short, chubby Jewish guy. He's not a tall, thin, good-looking British guy. So there's that difference. Other than that, it was based on him. So you can see that it's kind of embedding itself in our culture. There's Lie to Me, there's Inside Out. This whole Ekman basic emotion faces thing it's kind of there, and it's much like a lie detector test. It's wrong. It simply doesn't work that way. I've been really tempted on YouTube to do on my YouTube channel to go and watch these. There are a million YouTube videos of people spotting liars, doing body language and face analysis. And I just want to react to them. I thought to react to one, but all I did is just sat there recording myself going, "That's crap. That's crap. No, that's not true. That's crap. That's crap." And realize I really want to explain why it's crap. And if I do that, each video is going to be 5 hours long. So I decided not to do it.
Well, what if somebody has a really good poker face too, right? Everybody knows a person that, you know, you can never read them or anything like that. I also want to go back. I want to go back and really push there because, you know, Helen said, you know, the sky is purple. She's in Florida. For all we know, the sky could be purple in Florida. Let's face it. I mean,
Technically, if you really get a good look at it, you know.
yeah, environmental regulations. So don't take that first. Maybe she didn't lie at all.
Or I could be on drugs.
Yeah, that's so true. If it was a week ago and 2 hours early, we had this Saharan dust blowing over the UK, so the sky was occasionally purple. So.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Wow,
or like, let's say the cones in my eyes didn't react properly, and blue appeared purple to me based on, because that's what happens with color. Like, color is very subjective, like blue. If I say that's blue and I say it's an azure blue and you say no, it's a lapis blue, is it still blue? Yes, it's blue, but it's all, so it's not really a lie if the cones in my eyes don't react the same way.
And it would also depend what language you speak, because there are languages that don't have a word for blue. They think it's a light black, and there are languages, Spanish, Italian, most of Latin languages, they have azure and they have blue, and they are two different colors to them. One's a light and there are cultures that have light red, and we call it pink, all sorts of. So even then, it depends who you're talking to and in what country. So.
Wow.
Though pink's a weird color because it shouldn't
like magenta's not really a real color. Like I forgot how they described it. Like it's not, it doesn't exist, but exists. It's the way that they describe. It's weird, and I'm just like, I'm looking at it. Like,
pink's the same. Pink is a combination of two colors from opposite ends of the spectrum, so it kind of doesn't exist much in nature except. I've seen lots of pink flowers, so
flamingos,
yeah. Prawns. After they're cooked.
I've seen shrimp.
Dr. Firth, thank you so much for being with us on the show today, explaining the history of emotion. If people want to find out more and want to get your book and find out more about your channel, where can they find you?
The book's A Human History of Emotion. If you speak English, it's called lots of different things in lots of languages. The most common foreign title is Homo Emoticus, which is my favorite title for the book. I wish I'd thought of that. But that's, if you're in Spanish or Dutch or something, look for Homo Emoticus. If you look for Dr. Rich FG anywhere, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you'll find me. I'm kind of simple. I keep it simple. So. YouTube, Dr. Rich FG. It's all Dr. Rich FG.
Excellent. Dr. Richard, before I let you go, of course, I got to have you say, hi, this is Dr. Richard Firth, and I took a left in the valley.
Hi, this is... Hang on. I told you I'm simple. Let me try again. Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Firth, and I took a left in the valley.
Fantastic.